And that is a pretty good segue into culture. There's an old Greek or Asian proverb that talks about the fish stinks from the head, or the fish rots from the head. If your culture is toxic, without exception, we can start to trace that back up through the ranks, and somewhere you're going to have a stinky head. How do you recognize a toxic culture? One of the quickest indicators for me is the level of resistance that you're experiencing when you're trying to help people understand, use, and start to perform with new ideas and new ways of working. If the people that you're working with, that their first reaction is to throw a stink bomb and to say, yes, but, well, that won't work in our culture, or that won't work because of X, Y, and Z, you're already looking at a culture that is at minimum dysfunctional, if not outright toxic. And I'm fast coming to the point where if a culture is actually toxic, then yeah, we can come in and help them at the team level, or maybe at the product and program level, start to succeed with implementing Agile and putting flow on top of Agile so that it's turbocharged. But without addressing the cultural issues, it's going to be an uphill battle that's just miserable. Your leadership takeaways for this video include culture, and the components of culture include vision, mission, purpose, core values and attitudes, strategies, goals, and objectives. Whenever you look at the definitions of culture in various dictionaries, all of these ideas and words will pop up. And then we're going to look a little bit at the key responsibilities for executives governing Agile. And of course, vision and culture is in their realm of responsibility. Communication and flow, and communicating flow at every level. And then prioritizing the work and the organizational velocity are also the responsibilities for the executives governing Agile. So if you're an executive and you don't know your organizational velocity, then you might want to take some time to figure out a way to measure that. One of the best, perhaps most famous quotes about culture is Peter Drucker's "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." I love that. I don't think he was saying that strategy was unimportant, but what I think he was trying to communicate is that culture is even more important than strategy. You can use red ocean, blue ocean, good strategy, bad strategy, whatever is the latest and greatest of strategy books that are out there right now. But the reality is that you can have really good strategies, but if your culture is such that you are unable to implement that strategy, then I believe that you're going to have trouble. Okay, now that said, every company has strategies, and we include strategy in the VSPT model, for example, where it's vision, strategy, people, and tasks. So we put strategy right up there, pretty much right after vision. But on the next slide, we're going to see what are the components of culture, and strategy is actually just one of about what we would view as 6 components of culture. While I absolutely love Peter Drucker's Culture Eats Strategy for Breakfast, My observation is that culture eats everything, and I mean absolutely everything, for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So that's my update to Peter Drucker's infamous quote. And as I mentioned in the last slide, culture has these 6 main components. As we were preparing our book, Nehemiah Effect and Flow, as we looked at the definitions for culture, what was really interesting looking at Merriam-Webster's dictionary, Oxford Dictionary, all the different dictionaries, when you started looking at the words that they included about culture, it included these 6 items: vision, mission, purpose, core values and attitudes, strategies, goals, and objectives. So I was really blown away when you start to look at what are the components of culture. These 6 items were the main ones that popped out of the page at me. Of course, without vision, people are going to perish. And vision is your short 5 to 7 word statement of what you want to be in the future. It needs to be crisp, it needs to be memorable, it needs to be easy to communicate. Otherwise, your vision is not going to do for your organization what it needs to do. And so I would actually suggest that vision is the most important part of culture. Now, you can argue about the order of the rest of these. This is just my view of the world. Mission is the business that we're in, and just as important, the business that we're not in. Purpose is your why. Why are we doing this? What is our higher purpose? Why are we doing this? And every culture has a purpose. The core values and attitudes, that's the ethos, that's the ethics, that's the things that we actually value. And it's not really a core value or attitude until somebody objects. If people aren't objecting, then it probably isn't really a core value of your organization. And organizations are spending tons of money to come up with 5, 6 value statements for the organization. And as I've shared in probably other slides and other parts of the organization or of this training, one of the best things I'd ever seen on this was one of our co-workers had the values poster up on the wall, and there were check marks next to it. And so we asked him, "Hey, Dave, what's up with that?" He ran over to his office door, looked up and down the hall, closed the door, ran back to his desk, and he said, "Yeah, every time an executive violates one of the core values and attitudes, I put a check mark." And it was nothing but check marks on the poster. So if you're only talking the talk and you're not walking the talk, you have a fractured vision and you have a fractured culture. Strategies are included in culture, okay? And so it doesn't matter if you use red ocean, blue ocean, purple ocean, good strategy, bad strategy, whatever. Every company has strategies, and there are entire courses on how to do strategy and strategic management, marketing strategy, financial strategy, all of those. The last one, goals and objectives. And notice that we're starting to get a little more concrete as we go from very abstract concepts of vision, mission, and purpose. You're starting to get more concrete when you start putting it to core values and attitudes, a little more concrete when you get it to strategies. When you get to goals and objectives, you can actually measure those, but they're still part of the culture. And so all of these need to be in alignment in order for your culture to function correctly. And we use the flow friction analysis to show where the culture isn't working. Again, vision is the ability to think about, plan, future with imagination or wisdom. And I grabbed these definitions from various dictionaries. I view vision as what you want to be in the future. Mission, an important assignment given to a person or group of people, typically involving travel abroad. For me, it's the business you're in. Purpose, the reason for which something is done or created or for which something exists. Again, this is the why, okay? The why for your vision. The values and attitudes are the principles or standards of behavior, one's judgment of what is important in life. And here again, are you actually walking the talk or just talking the talk? The strategies are a plan of action or policy designed to achieve a major or overall aim. Okay, your roadmap for getting to where you want to be. And then goals and objectives. A lot of people talk about SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. And for me, it's concrete, measurable increments of prioritized, valuable work. Okay, so I have a slightly different view than the traditional SMART view for writing goals and objectives. So the key executive roles for governing enterprise agile is you got to have that clear vision and culture. You have to manage the communication and flow at each organizational level, and the executives have to prioritize. And we need to know what your organization's velocity is. Now, I know that velocity can then end up being a proxy variable, but it's a useful one. Okay. We'll get into that a little bit later when we talk about how do you actually do some of the reporting. But it's the trend lines. If you remember what Dr. Burris said in Anticipatory Vision and Flash Foresight, you're measuring both hard trends and soft trends. And the trends don't have to be perfect because they're going to change over time anyways. But as you go over time and you're consistently measuring it, guess what? You get more and more accurate indications for the executives of the trends that are happening on the completion of projects, programs, and portfolios so that they can actually sit there and go, oh, we actually can make some relatively well-informed, intelligent decisions based on imperfect inputs. And that's half of the battle when you're going to go in and govern an organization, whether or not you're using Enterprise Agile or not. The thing I used to always share when I was working both at the program and portfolio level is that on the average, we'll be right. Does that mean that on any particular project we might be way off? Well, yeah, we could be horribly off. We had an instance with this particular customer or client that I'm thinking about, where one of the product owners had completely misjudged how much time to allocate for each person. They somehow mistakenly believed that you could allocate 100%. And so the team came to me they're just wild-eyed, and they said, Andrew, there's no way we're going to be done by April. There's no way. We can't make it. And this is like in January, or maybe it was in March. I don't remember, but it was the deadline was coming up fast. And so I called the product owner and say, hey, can you share your spreadsheet with me? And the minute I saw the spreadsheet on their projections for how much time everybody was going to spend on this particular project, and we had fully dedicated teams, so that wasn't an issue. These team members were fully allocated to a single project, so it was like nirvana. It was just perfect. But when I saw that their estimates were based on 100% and not 82%. I pointed out to the product owner and I said, well, you don't get 100% of a person's time. And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, you've got vacations, you got holidays, you got sick days, you've got all these different things that are going to reduce that to probably 82% to start with. And then on top of that, you're assuming you're going to get 100% efficiency out of them. You can't do that either. And so when we corrected the numbers just down to 82%, all of a sudden it looked like, ooh, June or July, was when they were actually going to be able to deliver, and the product owners going, I can't go back to the board and tell them we're not going to make the April date. And I said, don't worry, I'll take it to the board, and I'll be more than happy to be the bearer of bad news. And if I'm not working here on Monday, then we'll have a nice going away party for me. And so I went to the CTO and COO who I was reporting to, and I said, guys, we have a situation here. We have a project that they had the finish date being around April, and it's clear they're not going to be done till the end of June, beginning of July, depending on when people take their vacations. And both of them, their eyes got really big, and they said, well, what are we going to do? We can't go back to the board and tell them we're not going to make it. This is a marketing deadline. I said, guys, we got to go back to the board and tell them we're not going to make it. I said, oh, by the way, I asked them a question. In the old way of doing things, when would have you guys known about something like this, that we weren't going to make the deadline? And they said, oh, well, we wouldn't have known it until the day of, or even after we missed the deadline. I said, so in reality, we just got an early warning of 3-4 months that under the old system, it wouldn't have been there. And they looked at me and they said, wow, you're right. Okay, well, let's take this to the board. So we went to the board, and there, of course, the reaction was predictable. They're all up in arms. And the CTO, he used my exact question for them. He said, guys and gals in the room, when would we have known about this kind of problem in the past? When would we have heard about this? And they said, oh, well, we would have at best heard about it a day or two before. He looked at me and he said, how many months in advance do we now know about this? And they went, oh, yeah. Oh. They said, so do we have time to do corrective actions, to do a course correction for the marketing? And they all sat there for a minute and go, oh, yeah, we can do that. We can mitigate this. And it's, again, we probably can't hammer this enough. A clear vision for the change isn't enough. It's not enough to even just walk the talk versus talking the talk. Dr. Cotter has shared in his writings that the vision for change is typically undercommunicated by a factor of 10, which means you need to be communicating your vision at minimum 10 times more than you think that you need to do. Another thing about change management and cultural change that nobody likes to talk about is that it is a long journey. It's going to take you 5 to 7 years, okay? And if we're talking about transformations, it might take 2.5 to 5 years. But if you're talking changing the culture in a large organization, it's probably a 7-year cycle. And it must include not just the buy-in from the board and the C-level on down, but active personal change for those executives and leaders. When I was at one of the companies, we trained everybody. In fact, in the interviews, I made it a condition of my employment that I would not accept the employment unless the CEO, the CTO, the COO, the director of business, the director of new product development, all the C-level board members, unless they were trained, including their direct reports all the way on down, I was not going to accept the assignment. And then as part of that, we had to adapt the existing corporate governance to agile governance, which means, again, we're changing the culture. If you're involved in a startup, I've probably already shared, if not in this deck or in this video. If not here, I've probably more than once shared some of the stories from Spotify about how when they went from 750 people up to 3,500 people, and as they scaled up in a startup, these things still apply. Okay, great. So they were able to mitigate the issue of not having the information in time. Okay? So as we're going through this, we're going to go through some additional items for vision. We're going to talk about cascading vision. We're going to talk about VSPT, which is a model from the 90s that has been around for a long time. It's actually from West Point Military Academy. By the way, the Israeli elite forces also use VSPT as one of their leadership models, but they don't call it that. We're going to talk about the power of the one thing and how to link back up through the organization via cascading vision. We're going to talk about a few issues about communication. I alluded to this earlier, where we're going to be talking about language, the difference of languages, the issue of dilution of the vision as it works its way throughout the organization. And then we're going to talk about how to distill and really leverage the power of the one thing. Later, we'll be talking about the 4D and 4R models. We're going to talk about the flow formula, the flow friction analysis that is based on that formula. And then we're going to talk about the 4 lenses of transformation. By the way, the communications calculator has been around for a very long time. The formula is n times n minus 1 divided by 2. And so if you have, for example, 440 stakeholders, the n is equal to 440, so it's 440 times 439 divided by 2. That gives you 96,000 channels. If you have 38 people or stakeholders on your committee, and you put that in there for n, then it's 38 times 37 divided by 2 equals 703 channels. Now, this is from an actual case that I worked with. You'll find this one in our book Flow, and it's the Singtel example, where in this project it was just the gridlock was unbelievable, and the communications became extremely complex due to the number of potential channels. So it just created an incredible amount of noise. So one of the first things I did with the senior vice president there at Singtel was say, hey, this isn't going to work. You can't have 440 people involved in this project. We need to reduce the number of stakeholders to 40. And that reduced the number of channels from 96,000 down to 780. And so we reduced the number of stakeholders by 91%, which resulted in a 99% reduction in channels, which basically resulted in a 99% reduction in noise. And we handled the other 400 by just saying, hey, you're going to get a newsletter, and if you have any concerns about that or anything that is troubling you or whatever, please reach out to our team first. If we're not able to answer your questions satisfactorily, we'll be happy to refer you over to the senior vice president and you can chat with him. And so we've started sending out the newsletter. And then for the steering committee, we had 4-hour shouting matches every Friday. And I told the senior VP, this isn't going to work. I said, we're never going to get anything done. So I asked them again, I said, can we reduce this down to a team of 8, knowing that a really good team size is between 7 and 9 people for that type of group. And he's like, no, I really need these 12. So it's like, okay, compromised a little bit. So we went from 38 down to 12, which was a 2/3 reduction, a little bit over 68% reduction in stakeholders. And it created, because of the reduction in channels, it created a 91% reduction in channels, and it ended up that that reduced the noise for that steering committee by 91%. The meeting times went from 4 hours every Friday down to 2, and it even got even less than that as time moved forward. And those other 26 people were included in that 40 stakeholders group. So they got moved over there, and they were part of the original 440 anyways. But you get the idea. The communications calculator is a way to show the complexity of your channels of communication. And then it just gets more and more complicated because you can have this both internal and then external to other vendors and suppliers. And then it can become very complicated very quickly. And this goes all the way back to the Stacy diagram and the Knevin diagram that showed that you can have simple requirements, simple technology, but if the communications are complex, then you need to use agile methods, agile techniques, agile tactics, and using the agile mindset to get things done. And so if you have complicated communications, you need to be able to show that to your stakeholders and say, okay, this is why we need to use Agile everywhere that we can. As Dr. Burris pointed out in a recent blog post on his website about Agile not being able to stand on its own, same holds true for change management, waterfall, traditional, classic, lean, Six Sigma, Kanban, everything in between. I've sort of looked at this as a somewhat of a continuum. If you look at project management, change management, or Agile Scrum, where it's more product management, if you're looking at these three types of management, traditional waterfall project management has between a 14 to 16% success rate. PMI Sweden, in cooperation with KPMG, have done a survey now for 4 or 5 years in Sweden. And I believe in 2016, their percent matched the Standish chaos report or something along those lines from 5-6 years ago, that only 14% of projects actually succeed. And then the next year they did the poll, 2017, it was like up to 15%. And for 18 and 19 or something like that, it was at 16%, so it leveled off. And at its current rate of improvement, that means it will take Scrum, or not Scrum, it'll take traditional waterfall about 14, 15 years to catch up with change management and their success rate. And another, let's see, another 26%, 28%, 26 to 28% to catch up to the traditional waterfall. That's a lot of years at their current velocity. It's going to take a while. And we've been using this slide for a number of years to sort of show why this is how it is. And it's really a question of culture, and whether or not the culture enables these methodologies to really work. I think that's one of the biggest blockers. My view of why projects, programs, portfolios tend to fail over time is everybody gets together in the beginning, everybody has a really tight vision, and the leadership's vision and the team's vision are the same in the beginning, but then they diverge over time. And so each quarter they're getting further and further apart, and leadership is looking at changes in the marketplace, or they're seeing new things on the horizon and they want to make a course correction, and the project's gone a completely different direction. That's why changing vision, changing the culture is a journey. You have to align the leadership, the teams, the organization. You have your current vision, your future vision, your current culture, your future culture, where you are today versus where you want to be. And this is, I think, one of the toughest things to do is to keep everyone in alignment. So changing culture and changing vision is a journey, and you do it one iteration at a time. And you do that by using the 4R model, the 4D model, all the things that we've been talking about with culture. It's a step-by-step process, and change and transformation is a journey, and you want to keep everybody together, moving the same direction, and make sure everybody's on the same page of music. And that this is perhaps one of the toughest things to do in leading any change or transformation that you're trying to do to your culture, and you do it by using vision. In this section, we looked at culture and the components that are included in culture. We looked at the key responsibilities for executives governing Agile, including vision, culture, communications and flow, prioritization, and organizational velocity. So from an application perspective, as a leader, I need to be really keenly aware of whether or not I'm helping to reduce noise in the organization, or am I actually contributing to the noise and confusion you have in the organization. So you have to be a little bit brutal with yourself on this particular one. Then, as a follow-up, you're going to want to look at, as a leader, how can I apply vision to help my teams reach their potential? And then how do I measure that? This one almost seems really abstract, but we have ways to do it. But do you, as an executive and leader, know what your organizational velocity is? And by the way, it's not just the executives that should know that. I should be able to walk up to any team member working on a team and ask them, hey, what's your organizational velocity? And they should have a pretty good feel and understanding for what that is. Some companies are better than others at doing this, but everybody can improve in this area.